stuck in your career and hoping to make a career change? Then you'll want to tune into this episode where my guest shares her insights on navigating career transitions, overcoming limiting beliefs, and networking so that you can land your next gig. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of The Leader Within. Today, I'm excited to introduce Manjula Selvarajah. Manjula is formerly a VP of marketing who pivoted into being a Toronto-based journalist, national technology columnist, CBC radio guest host, and podcast host for SolveforX. On top of that, she's a co-founder of the nonprofit Tamil Women Rising and a board member of Scientists in School. Given her diverse background, I'm excited to have her share her insights with you. Well, welcome, Manjula. Okay, you have such an interesting background. You got an education in engineering. You landed a role in VP of marketing for a Toronto-based startup eventually, and then you pivoted into journalism and hosting podcasts. So can you take us a little bit on your journey and kind of what made you make the pivots that you did?
So Angela, this is the most frequent question I get asked. Like if you go through any of my DMs or my DMs in LinkedIn where people are looking for mentoring advice, and I'm sure you get a ton of those, because people are looking for women that they can have these conversations with. It is the number one question that I get asked by people. Like perhaps it's also a time that people are thinking of change and pivoting, and it's never been as easy as it is now to pivot careers. So anyway, very briefly, I see myself as having sort of had two careers that I absolutely love. I actually loved what I was doing before, because the first question people ask me is, did you hate it? No, I loved it. But I was taking a break to start my family, and I was at that same point, I was advocating on behalf of migrants coming to Canada. I was involved with some non-for-profits. And through that work, I started meeting these journalists. Like we would pitch stories to journalists. Every nonprofit in the city does that. And I would meet these journalists, and I'd never really encountered journalists in those kinds of interviews before. And they were thoughtful, so informed on the issue. I don't know how they stay informed, even though there's like 20 topics they may be doing through the year. Really curious, and I really got along with the journalists that I met. And then one of them said, it's kind of interesting. Have you ever thought of like coming around the table and coming to this role? And that was it. It was like the switch where I went, I think I want to do this next. Because I love to see when you walk me through your day. But of course, it wasn't like the switch wasn't like this. I then went and did a ton of research. And even then, even after having all of that research and taking all of the precautions that I needed to, I still had certain things that didn't go right in my journey. So, and it's based on that I've sort of learned or come up with the sort of framework for the right way to approach change. But yeah, that's how it started. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful to have had that amazing career with a whole bunch of incredible people that I met, and now to transition to this. And there are actually links between both of them.
Appreciate it. And before I dive into the links piece, one thing that came to mind was, did you ever have to battle with the internal monologue where traditionally as ethnic women, we grow up being like, okay, maybe go towards the engineer, accountant, doctor, whatever more prestigious, and I use that with air quotations, prestigious profession, and journalism wasn't even a forethought for a lot of our, again, ethnic parents. So did you kind of have to undo some ways of thinking as you're making career choices so that you can actually pursue your passion and happiness? Or did that just come very naturally where you're like, I don't give a about what other people think?
That's a great question. I think if I had when I had been in school, in high school, let's say, or even let's say I was taking some sort of a general program in university, if the idea of journalism would never have crossed my mind, because at that point, I was very set. I don't come from a wealthy family. I was very set on making sure that I had a way to pay my bills. And so, I also happened to really like math and physics and all of those things. So I gravitated towards engineering. However, I would say that one of the things that happens when you work at a startup is there is this, you're given a lot of power to make decisions because there's no one else. It's not because you're some special someone. There's no one else that can do the work. There's only like 10 of you or 15 of you. And I think as you make mistakes, you fix it, you move on really rapidly, there's this incredible confidence that you get over time. And you have to understand, it was a really long startup journey. Like, I think by the time I left, I might have been there for between 8 to 10 years, right? And the company had grown from when I joined from 13 people to something like 300 people. So I think what happens when you go through a startup experience is you get this strange amount of confidence that makes you think you can do anything. I think that's good, but I think it can also be bad for you, right? So that's one of the lessons that I learned, that in some ways I actually have to check my confidence when it comes, and I have to check it by researching and talking to people who can give me reality check scenarios. But so again, it wouldn't have been a decision that I made earlier, but that kind of confidence that I got from working through a startup is what allowed me to make the jump.
I appreciate you sharing that lesson. And earlier you had mentioned a framework or the ties where to identify that in order to effectively transition. So can you tell us a little bit more about what that looks like?
So the framework itself, I think I started coming up with it because I I think about a year after I started working as a journalist, I started getting like floods of emails and calls for people who wanted to have coffee to make all sorts of transition. Like, I am this and now I want to design homes. I am this and I want to give it all up and become a chef. Like, it was all over the place, right? And I think the easiest way, I think I should paint a picture of what the framework looks like in my mind. And it's based on my failures and some of the things that I did right. So let's say that there's this gorgeous blue lake. You are on the East Coast and there's the West Coast. So there are these two coasts. You want to get from here to here. And it kind of, imagine the coast waves in and out this way. But you have decided you want to go from here to here. You want to make that jump. And you could jump. People maybe have done it. You want to make that jump. So what you should do, and what anyone would do before you make the jump, is stop and think about, why do you want to make the jump? Why exactly do you want to leave the island you're on, right? What is it about the other island that you want to go to, and what is life like there? What is it like? Have you talked to people? And can you come back, right? And what is that journey across that jump like? Is it deep? Are there sharks that are going to sort of bite your leg as you jump across? Is it even possible to make the jump? So there's all of that research. And then the next thing that you have to remember is you have to find a spot that is the closest between both points. And you have to make sure that when you're making the jump, you're not doing it from like a shaky rock. You're going to do it from a stable rock. So again, the three key, like if you look at those questions, it's, why am I leaving? Could I improve the scenario I'm in right now, the job or whatever change I'm in? Why do I want to go over there? What is it? Is it like I need someone to paint me, a couple of people to paint me a real picture of why I should be there? Can I come back if I need to? How hard is that career change? And are there pitfalls? Are there holes that I could fall into? And finally, if I'm going to do it, what is the way that I could do that where it's a lateral move, right? And if I'm going to do that, are things stable? Like, am I making this change at a time when perhaps I'm also going through fertility issues or relationship troubles, or I'm having to do caregiving for my parents, whatever it is? Like, is that ground that you're standing on as you're about to leap, is that stable? Do I have some money in my bank account before I make the change? So that is that framework. And I think that I know, I want, when I talk to people, I feel like people want me to say, just do it, you'll love it, just do it. But Angela, I can't. I can't give that kind of advice. I always tell people that you have to sort of think through this decision, and whatever that changes, it doesn't have to be career. It could be moving countries too, right? Yeah.
You have attributes of a coach where you don't tell people what to do, but you help them arrive to that destination so that it contextually makes sense for them. And I really appreciate that, because I think whenever someone comes to you for advice, it's like you don't know a lot about what is going on behind the scenes to even inform your answer, right? Especially if they're only giving you bits and pieces. So I love that. And I think
I've never heard that. That's great. Thank you. That's actually a lovely compliment. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think one of your biggest strengths as well is you've been able to build a community of ambitious allies. And from what I've noticed through a lot of successful individuals is that's one of the key traits that they have. So can you tell me a little bit more about how you were able to do that and kind of what process you kind of went through internally or externally to make that happen?
Yeah, the allies, my gosh, I so believe in this. And I think one of the mistakes that I've made in the past and I see other people making is not building that network until they desperately need it. Right? This is because it's real. I mean, at the end of the day, we have 13 things, 30 things on our minds every day. We're trying to get so much done. It's the last thing to get to. But I think that the way to look at it is it's the way that you do your vitamins. Like I have a vitamin, my life doesn't change drastically, but I know that 5 years from now, my life is going to be better because I took that 1 minute to do that. So I really think what's important about allies is to think about building allies that are at the same level as you, mentoring people, because you learn so much from having a whole bunch of people that are younger because they have a whole new perspective. And you know what? Like the world is changing, like the industry is changing. So they could be there at the forefront of something that you're not aware of. And then the other thing is also forming connections to people who've actually taken the path ahead, right? So the crazy thing is people are like, well, how do I do that? I go, there are tons of fabulous organizations in the city. And there are even very niche organizations, right? You can find an organization that is, a women data scientist that exists as an organization, right? So I think that finding groups that you can network with, make an effort doing that. Like Angela, I love that you're doing that. I see this as a way of you not only doing all of these things, you're forming your own connections. I'm learning from you, but you're also, in a way, through this 1 hour, mentoring all of the people that listen into your podcast. So this is another way to do it. But I can't say enough about investing in this. And I think at any point, if people are confused about how to do it, there's actually a whole bunch of great books on how to build your network. The classic How to Win Friends and Influence People, that's a classic, and I know people hate hearing it, but I think just read a book and get started. This is not rocket science. It's not like I know or Angela knows anything more than the rest of you. Like this is not rocket science, but you need to do it.
Hear you, and that's like a timeless classic that I feel like the principles will always be there, right? And speaking of the mentoring piece, because you are one of the co-founders of Tamil Women Rising, right? And you're a board member of Scientists in School. So how do you inspire and foster leadership in others, especially in underrepresented groups, so that you can empower that next generation of leaders?
So a couple of ways, right? I think for starters, I want to take a step back to the question that you said before, because there's one thing that I wanted to mention that might actually be an easy way for people to kind of do that networking within there or build those allies is you can actually pick a small group of women, just a little, they become like your personal board. All organizations have boards. You've heard this idea before. And trust me, tons of women that you talk to that are leaders have this. It doesn't have to be massive. It could be 3 to 5 people. You don't have to tell them, by the way, you're on my board. It doesn't have to be that. But these are women you contact once in a while to say, this is how I'm doing. I want to toss some ideas by you. And, or, take a look at this, or here's my business plan, or here's my, I don't know, my LinkedIn profile, whatever it is, throwing ideas by checking in with them, supporting them. But it's this idea that you have a small group of people that give you advice. And it could start off being colleagues that you admire, but eventually it could be women that are 2 or 3 steps higher than you in positions that you would like to have in a couple of years. So I highly recommend this strategy if you feel like, look, I don't have the time to call one person every day or message one person every day, then create that small group of 3 to like 8 women that you can keep in touch with, that form your personal board. Having said that, remind me of what your next question is.
Yes, and before we go back to that next question, now you've got me like, okay, I have another question on this.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's one thing to actually build that community, but I notice one of the most difficult things is to sustain the community, right?
Yeah,
Because as you add more connections to your network, it's like,
yeah.
oh man, like how do I keep up? My feed is inundated. So what does that look like for you outside of your board? I use that with air quotations again, to sustain your network. Like how do you identify who I need to be very cognizant of maintaining touch points? And how frequent does that look like? What's the mindset?
It's tough. I don't think you can do more than like I've tried to figure it out, and I don't think that you can do more than about 50 people. And that 50 people that I keep in touch with moves, but these are sort of 50 essential people that I need for a couple of things. One is related to parenting, right? And the other is related to work, and the other is related to some personal relationships. But it is these 50 people that if they message me, they get a response. If they DM me, they get a response. Like if they send me an invitation to something, I have to be there, right? And the others, once in a while, if they I might say, hey, I'm going to this event, do you want to come with me? I've got an extra ticket. So there are other softer ways that you can do that too. The last thing that I wanted to say is that going on to, you don't have to do this, but even going on to any kind of a social platform and sharing or learning that you've come across is actually incredibly powerful. Like if you read a great book, don't just go up and say, look at this fabulous book, but if you read some paragraph in there and you think, my goodness, this is going to change the way I approach parenting. This one paragraph, put it up there because a ton of us don't have the time to read that book. If you come across a podcast that is just like this, filled my soul listening to this woman, put that up, right? Or listening to this man, put that up. And I think that sharing that kind of wisdom, like I went to this place and I had laksa and it was so good, and it's this kind of like place in Scarborough that is just family owned, put that up. That is actually some wisdom for someone that is, so it doesn't have to be calls and emails and keeping in touch with that larger audience. It could be sharing really sort of like tactical things that they can use that makes their life better.
I appreciate that call out because for those who are intimidated by content creation, this is where content curation comes in, right? So
Yeah.
not only are you able to help promote and create value for those who authored that original piece of content, but then like subconsciously you become like a almost like a trusted leader within an X space because
Yes.
your audience is just like, or the people in your network like, okay, like I didn't even have to like read that entire article and I got the golden nuggets out of that, right?
Exactly. And I guess that, and you just highlighted the value is it's not just saying, here's the experience. It's saying, here's that nugget that I hope you can run with because it meant a lot to me. So you've actually added your own personal inflection. And in a way, they actually understand you better because they've now seen this. Yeah.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that. And then, so going into the question of the work that you do as a co-founder of Tamil Women Rising
Yeah.
and just as a board member, how are you inspiring and fostering leadership in those underrepresented groups and just empowering that next generation of leaders?
So it was very important to me, once I had sort of a little bit of time freed up in my schedule, to find a way to give back to mentor women in science and technology. And I kind of want to make sure that if I had an hour of my time, it would go to something that was, that would have as much good as possible and with people that are already doing it. So this organization that I volunteer with, I sit on their board, Scientists in School. I love them. They've actually done science workshops that have sort of influenced 11 million children across the country. That's the amount of people that have attended their workshops. They've been around for over 25 years. Their executive director just won the order of, recognized with an Order of Ontario. Like that's the kind of organization they are. They do phenomenal work. They go into schools and they basically do these interesting experiments that excite children about science and technology, because if you get the curiosity going, then it could amount to something. And it's not just about a career in science and technology, but appreciating the power of science and technology, right? So that's one way that I do it. And that's another way that people could find, if you care about a particular issue, if you care about homelessness, or you care about, if you care about poverty, if you care about mentoring young women, whatever it is, sitting on a board can be a really wonderful way of taking whatever expertise that you have. In my case, it's marketing, PR, and offering it to an organization, right? So that's one way that I do it. And then Tamil Women Rising is just something that I love.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, Angela, it is. Sometimes I think I wonder if I'm getting more out of it than everyone else. But the women that I talk to that volunteer there say the same thing. And it's wonderful. It's a non-profit networking collective. Like, it is really focused on helping Tamil women and their allies advance in their careers. And what we do is we just get people in rooms together. And even when we get them into rooms together and we give them an hour to network, they say it's not enough. We want more. So that shows you how much of a thirst there is for people to find easy rooms that they can network in, because networking is a really odd thing to do in unfamiliar rooms. So what we're doing is we're presenting a space where you can come in, meet other people, and find yourself a group of people that you can surround yourself with that have similar ambitions to yourself. That is our purpose, right? And sure, we do workshops and we do all sorts of other things, but that is the purpose. Find that community that you need. Like, if you're struggling to find that 3 to 10 women, here they are. And they don't have to all be in your space. Like, I know about a researcher in dementia who told me that she met a textile designer that is her close friend in that organization. So it is also the idea that you can actually fill your network with people from different spaces, right?
I
And you're
appreciate
welcome
that you
anytime. You're welcome anytime. We'd love to have you there.
Thank you. And I appreciate that you create the space, because one thing that I'm very mindful of, like, is there are so many networking groups that sometimes, and I say this with like an understanding that it's privilege that I even have access to this, but it
Yeah,
becomes overwhelming. And then I'm
it
just like,
does.
so which one do I go to? Because I really want to add value to whatever room I go in. And if I can't, I don't want to
Yeah.
be there. Um, and so that's why I'm like, the fact that like your data, right, the feedback that you've received says, yeah, like we love this, it says a lot about what you guys are doing. And I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. We're gonna go into your podcast, Solve4X. So when it comes to technology and leadership, what has been one of your biggest epiphanies to date as you continue to interview the guests that you have?
About leadership, that's really interesting. I think what I've discovered is that we have this idea of what we think founders are. And I think they're defined by who in the past we've seen grace Forbes magazine, or, they're probably sort of the 4 or 5 men that probably look and sound like Zuckerberg, let's say, right? But, what I've discovered is that people that are immersed in the middle of a problem have an idea and they just need to figure out how to make it into something. So, gosh, there's so many of them. There is, like, I think of this doctor who basically has a company that has artificial intelligence that can that strives to identify when the next pandemic will be. Well, he's a doctor that's worked around. He's an infectious disease specialist, so of course this is the space that he's in, right? I think of the marine scientist that I interviewed with one of our last few episodes, who actually she and I listened to whales together. So the sound of whales in really noisy waters, shipping waters. And what she was trying to convey to me is this idea that this, oh my gosh, the sound of, by the way, the sound of ships in water, I didn't realize how loud they were compared to whale sound. But what she was talking to me is just about how important it is to do the work that she needs to do without affecting the very wildlife that she's trying to save. So she had autonomous boats that are not manned, that are really silent, that go through the water. So you understand how people, these are smart people, but regular people who are trying to do something and go, oh my gosh, here's a problem. Maybe I could be the one to solve it. So I think as a country, what we need to do is, when we listen to those stories, we need to figure out how is it that we can take this person and link them up to venture capital, or to money, or to resources, or to an innovation hub. That's what the rest of us need to be thinking about, because the next step for them, that jump to go from an idea to crossing the island to making it a venture, is tough. And it takes, like, sometimes it helps if you're if you're wealthy and you have connections, But what about the everyone else that has all of these great ideas? I think that's what the rest of the country has to figure out, how to enable these people to have more of these ideas. But that's what Solve4X is about. Solve4X is like shining a light on these incredible innovators and scientists throughout Canada that are trying to fix really large problems. Like they're not like, I'm trying to design a better cup, which is also, if you want to do that, kudos to you, but they're really trying to address things like climate change and other issues.
Appreciate how you highlight those stories through Solve4X, because one thing that as I grow older, I'm like, I can't solve all the problems in the world, nor do I have all the interest to solve every other problems. But then to be able to kind of create platforms to amplify the voices of those who do have a passion for it, I think is absolutely incredible. And have you noticed that our government, or I guess private equity firms and stuff, are investing more into some of these subject matter experts, or do you think that there's still a really large gap because there's a lack of awareness potentially?
I think that I think it's just a very difficult thing to do, right? And I think that my guess is that governments are pulled in all sorts of different directions to think about where to invest this money. But sometimes it's not just even I mean, eventually it does get to money. But what I keep hearing from entrepreneurs about what they want, and I think there's some gold there, is that they want more established companies and organizations with money to actually invest in these solutions. They want the big banks and the big insurance companies and the big automakers to actually use beta versions of this product. They're not looking for free money, but they're saying that wherever there are organizations that are large and can afford to try these things, we're here for you. That seems to be the link that they want first. But I think there is interest from government. I mean, there've been all sorts of announcements through different administrations about supporting entrepreneurs across the country. Let's see where all of that takes us. I'm certainly watching it with interest.
Yeah. I really do hope that we invest into that space. So, and as we slowly wrap up our conversation, one of the questions I have for you is, when it comes to unleashing the potential of individuals and or organizing, what do you think is maybe the one thing that comes to mind that is pivotal to doing so?
I think it's trying to get an understanding of what they want, not just what you want, right? And trying to find, I think that a lot of people approach these conversations as, well, what is it that I need to check off? What is it that I need to get done? And I think that you have to find where those two circles intersect. And I think along with that is trying to get an understanding of what is the unique value, that unique value proposition that they bring to the table, right? And trying to get a real good understanding of that, because there is a chance that that could actually be really powerful in helping them climb whatever ladder or get wherever they want to be, but also helping your organization and your leadership efforts meet your targets, right? So it's really, I think we could all do that actually, just regularly as people, as when we meet each other, try to figure out, well, what is unique about what you offer, and how can I highlight that in some way, and make sure that you get the attention that you deserve for having that unique value.
Thank you for sharing your perspective on that. And my last question to you is, what's one thing that you're working on that you're super excited about?
Oh my gosh, definitely the podcast. I'm super excited about the podcast. I find myself very inspired by talking to people that are knee deep in a problem, and they're trying to solve it, and they have an idea and they're putting all of their effort to it. I find it very, very inspirational. And so that season 2 of our podcast is out now. It's called Solve4X. You can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. And if people have feedback or they're seeing interesting things in their communities or with people around them, I'd love to hear about them.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights and just for everything you're doing through Solve4X, Tamil Women Rising, and being a board on Scientists in School. It sounds like they're making an incredible impact. And to everyone else who's tuned into another episode, thank you so much for your time and attention. It means more to me than you'll ever know. And I can't wait to stay in touch with you on my next episode. Till then, stay safe. All right, I'm gonna click stop.